Well, hello my friends. Welcome back to another video. Today I am upcycling some tin cans and a used bottle into cute scarecrow DIYs for fall. Well, it is Create Day, so let's get started. The bottle I'm using for this first project had the label painted on, so I'm using a razor blade to scrape all of that off. Once that was done, I gave it a good washing, and now I'm rubbing it down with some rubbing alcohol. I'm using Decor glass paint to paint on my facial features. And I put a strip of painter's tape across there just so I could make sure I got the bottoms of my eyes even. I tear that off and then I can go in and just touch up the little spots that didn't completely cover. When the black was dry, I went in with some of the white glass paint to add some little highlights to the eyes. Now, I will tell you that freehand painting like this is not something I'm particularly good at, but I decided to go for it and he still turned out pretty cute. So if that seems intimidating, just give it a go. Maybe just practice on a glass jar that you don't care about. It really didn't end up being that difficult. Now I'm using orange to paint in a triangular nose and then back with the black to give him a little crooked mouth. I added some little stitching lines to the mouth and now I'm doing the same around the nose. Lastly, I added some little white highlights to his mouth, and that was it. The little face part is done. Now this is a piece of insulation foam. You can tell because it has that seam down the middle there that you can pull it apart. And I'm going to cut this off about a 1-inch piece. I'm going to be placing this around the neck of the bottle. So if the neck of your bottle is skinnier, then you could use a pool noodle. It just depends on the size of the neck. This one fit perfectly over mine. This will give me a base to attach a hat to. So now I'm using cardstock to start building the top part of my hat. I've measured how tall I need this to be. I'm making my marks, and then I'm just going to cut this out. I'm using my little paper cutter, but you could just use scissors for this part. I'm applying a good coat of Mod Podge onto that cardstock because I want to glue down a piece of burlap ribbon. The ribbon I'm using came from Amazon. It's 3 inches wide, and I will leave a link to that and as many of the products that I can leave links for in the description box, along with a list of everything I used in today's video. Then I just cut off the excess, leaving just a little bit of overlap. I'm going to fill the bottle with raffia, so I am cutting it down into manageable sized pieces so that I can stuff my bottle. Once I had a bunch of this in there, I took a little dowel rod and used that to kind of tamp it down, move it around, and get my bottle nice and full with the raffia. So now it's time to make the hat. I'm using my Titebond Quick and Thick to glue that little piece of insulation foam around the neck of the bottle. I secured it with a rubber band just to keep it nice and tight on the neck of the bottle while the glue dried. And now that the glue is dry on that cardstock and burlap ribbon piece, I'm rolling it up around itself so that it will curve nicely around this. And I'm using hot glue to apply it to that piece of insulation foam. And as you can see, there's a space that will be left open above the insulation foam. and that's where I can fill that in with some more raffia. So now to make the brim of this hat, I'm taking another piece of that ribbon and I'm going to start at the back, attach that with some hot glue, and then I'm folding over to make a little pleat, and then I will glue that down. And I'm going to continue this process around the bottle, just spacing it out a little bit, gluing some of that down, making another pleat, and then gluing the pleat down. This will give him kind of that floppy hat look instead of like a straight rigid brim. It will be more like a little floppy garden type hat. I'm going to continue this all the way around the bottle, and when I get around to the back, I trim it off and then fold under the edges and then glue those down so it has a nice finished edge at the back. Now this is a piece of homespun fabric that I got from Amazon. It comes in a jelly roll. They're 2.5 inches wide, and you get 22 strips total, 2 each of the different patterns. And I really like this stuff. I'm just cutting that one strip in half and then tying it around the hat where the brim meets the hat. And here's what I'm doing with the raffia. I tied a knot in the center, and then I'm folding that up in half so that I can hot glue that down in between, in that space in between the cardstock and the bottle of the neck, right on to the top of that insulation foam that I had put in there. And I think I used a dozen of these. I'm just taking several pieces of raffia to knot up and make into one piece. I'm going to hot glue all those down in there. And then for the middle section where the bottle is open, I'm taking 2 of those, gluing them together, and then placing that down into the middle of the bottle. And I had one little spot that wasn't quite filled in there, so I'm going to add another piece to that. And then you just trim this down to the height that you want. I'm going to add this cute little sunflower that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. I'm going to take that little sticker covering off, put some hot glue on here, and attach that to the hat. Now I'm going to add some little wood buttons. I think these came from JoAnns. Next, I'm adding some of the paper sunflowers that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. And as a final touch, I curl up one little side on his hat there and hot glue that in place, and then put one of those paper sunflowers there. And that's it for this little guy. Simple, cute, and inexpensive to make. Okay, for this next DIY, I'm using these 2 tin cans. One is slightly larger than the other. I need to cover up this inside edge, so I'm going to take one of these pieces of the wood planks that you can get from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to cut that down into a size that will fit just into the inside of that rim on that tin can. I'm using E6000 to glue that piece down. And the reason I'm doing this is to give a nice solid base so that I can glue the 2 cans together. Once that's dry, I'm going to give both cans a coat of my fusion paint in the color Chateau. For the larger can, which will be his face, I'm doing a second coat using my little sponge dauber to give this some texture. And now for the top part, which will be his hat, I'm taking some more of that burlap ribbon and I'm going to wrap this around, see about how much I need, cut that off, and then apply this with some hot glue. I cut another piece of that ribbon in half so that I could use it to finish off the top part of this can. But before I do that, I want to cover up those ridges on the bottom of the can. So I'm going to trace around and then cut this out, and this is cardstock. And then I can cut out a piece of the burlap ribbon to wrap around this so I have a nice finished look on the top. So I just cut out a little piece there and then go around snipping this down but leaving a little bit extra so that I can fold that in. Once I get this hot glued on there, I can fold those edges around so it's nice and finished. So now that that's done, I can go ahead and attach the top piece of ribbon to the can, and then I can fold the excess on the top onto the top of the can, and then place my little round piece on top of that. This is another piece of that homespun fabric that I got from Amazon. I'm going to cut this into 3 pieces, tape it to my desk, and do kind of a wonky braid. I want to be able to wrap this around the edge of the can where that little disc meets the side of the can. So as I'm gluing this on, I'm going to pull that braided piece and twist it up even more so it's nice and tight. To cover up that seam, I'm just going to use some jute twine, add a little drop of hot glue and get that started, wrap this around several times, then snip it off and glue the piece down. And then a little later on, I add some of my Van Dyke brown glaze over that twine. But in the meantime, I'm taking my Van Dyke brown glaze to go over the bottom can, which will be the Scarecrow's face. I'm brushing that on, wiping it back with a cloth, and then I take a baby wipe and wipe even more of it back so it leaves most of that glaze in the grooves and not completely all over the can. Now, I personally like this kind of antiqued look for this particular project, but if you don't, you can just leave this step out. For his eyes, I'm going to use Fabri-Tac glue to attach 2 little black buttons to 2 little squares of that burlap ribbon that I cut out. For his nose, this is a little triangular piece that was like an offshoot from when I cut up that square from Dollar Tree to fit the top of the can. And I'm just painting that pumpkin orange. Now for his mouth, I am taking another offshoot from that same little piece of wood, and I'm going to make some angles on the one end here and then cut down the middle. That will be like the corner of his mouth. And then I'm just going to make several little small pieces, put those all in line, and that's what will make his mouth. I give those all a quick sanding with my finger sander, and then I take some of my black paint, water it down, and I'm just going to toss all those little pieces into this cup, get them all coated really well, and then take them out and let them dry. Once those were dry, I gave them a good sanding to distress them a little bit, and then gave them all a coat of that Dixie Belle Van Dyke brown glaze. You could also use antiquing wax for this. Now I'm just going to burn off those fuzzies of that jute twine and then brush on some of that brown glaze. Now to address this hole on the bottom of the can, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the top, as far as, only this is cardboard, not cardstock. It's a little bit thicker, so it will fit right into that little opening resting on the ridges on the inside of that can. And I'm using my Fabri-Tac glue to attach this inside of there. That will give me a nice base to adhere to the other can. I'm attaching the eyes with some Gorilla Super Glue gel. And now the nose and then the mouth. I'm using Titebond Quick and Thick to attach the two cans together. For the brim of the hat, I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other scarecrow, doing the little pleats all the way around. Only with this one, I add some trim to the edge, which I think really makes it next level. It looks so cute. This is the trim. I think I got it from Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to apply this with my Fabri-Tac glue. You could also use hot glue, of course. I just preferred this so I would have enough time to kind of work it in, make sure I got it all straight and lined up properly. I just think that looks so cute. Now I have this little wood crow I got from 24 Hour Crafts. I'm going to paint it in DIY's black velvet. While that's drying, I'm going to take this little candle holder that I picked up at the thrift store, clean it up, and give it a coat of my orange spray paint. I decided that this little guy needed some hair, so I cut up some more of that raffia, and just using my glue gun, I'm going to apply this. I started out trying to do like bunches at a time, and it wasn't any faster, so I ended up just doing them individually, which you'd think would take forever, but it really didn't take that long. And once I had all those on there, I'm just attaching a little bead of glue at the top of that brim so that it will lay down and not show where all those pieces are glued on. Then I just gave him a haircut. For this next part, I'm going to use the Apothecary labels from IOD, some StazOn ink in jet black, and I'm going to stamp the words hayseeds onto a piece of cardstock. I'm going to cut that down a little bit with my paper cutter and then cut out each individual letter. I needed these letters to be closer together than I could get them with the stamping, so that's why I'm doing this step. And I'm going to apply each individual letter onto a piece of drop cloth. Once I had those all cut out, I still needed to remove a little bit more of the cardstock, so I just hand cut the edges, but at least I was working from an original straight edge. I'm cutting out a piece of my drop cloth, and then I'm taking my Distress Oxide in Vintage Photo to go around the edges of each little letter. I have my drop cloth trimmed down to the shape that I want, and now I'm applying the letters with some Fabri-Tac glue. I'm happy with how that looks, so I'm just going to trim off the end a little bit. I'm using another strip of that homespun fabric, doing another kind of messy wrap around here. Just wrapping it around the back and then around the front and then around in the back again and tying it off. I snip off some of that excess because I'm going to use that as the background for my drop cloth. I trim that piece of fabric down to fit so that it just is a little bit bigger than the drop cloth, and then I'm going to glue that on to my drop cloth piece with some Fabri-Tac glue. I gave that crow a coat of my antiquing wax, brushing that on and wiping it back. And then I'm going to take my little candlestick holder that I spray painted orange and do a coat of DIY Summer Crush. Then I did the top part with my matte sealer because I'm going to do wax on the rest of it, and I didn't want wax on the top because that's where I'm going to be gluing it to the bottom can. And I thought the wax might kind of interfere with the adhesion. So anyway, now I'm just gluing on that crow with some hot glue, putting some Quick and Thick on the top of the hat so I can add some Spanish moss. And then I will be adding in some florals. I'm using some ink to just kind of grunge up this set of 3 little leaves, and then I'm adding those to the back of a flower and then gluing that into the center of the hat. I have these rusty stars that I got from Amazon. I'm going to glue that to the top of that little hayseeds banner and then attach that to the hat. Now I'm attaching all the little bits and pieces from various picks that I've just gathered over the years. And I actually got really carried away with this. I did not intend on filling in this entire top of the hat, but I just kind of got in a zone and forgot that I hadn't intended to do it that way. So it ended up being very full, very bright. So I ended up toning it down in just a minute. In the meantime, I'm going to add some clear wax to the DIY paint that's on my little candlestick. I'm going to wipe that back, and then I'm going to go in with some antiquing wax. So now back to that hat. I decided to take that Van Dyke brown glaze and just kind of brush it over all those bright little florals and berries and all the goodies I have on there, just to kind of tone it down a little bit so it's more fitting for this project. I decided I wanted this little pedestal to be a little bit darker, so I added some black wax and wiped that back. Now for the eyes, I thought it would be cute to add these little wooden buttons that have a little more character to them than just the plain black, but it kind of makes him look scary. But then I thought, well, he's a scarecrow, so that's okay. These are just little flower buds that I'm going to stick in a couple of areas of that homespun fabric. And then I'm going to attach the scarecrow to the candle holder. I'm using E6000 for this. When that was dry, I'm adding my, what I'm going to call like a neckerchief with that same fabric, hot gluing in a couple of spots front and back so that it will stay in place. And then I'm just going to do another one of those kind of messy wraparound situations. Tie it off in the back and then trim up any little excess strings and add a little hot glue wherever I feel it was needed. Both of these projects were a lot of fun, and it's so easy to take these basic ideas and just make them your own. So if you haven't tried something like this before, I hope you will. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you find my content useful, will like and subscribe to my channel, but more importantly, I hope I've inspired you to go create something. See you next time.